Welcome to On the Ground for Palestine and Israel for the week of July 2nd, 2022, brought to you by Kumi Now. We're halfway through 2022, and Kumi Now is taking its mid-year relaunch week, which is an opportunity to take a bit of a rest and reflect on what we've done so far and what our goals are for the rest of the year. But the news continues, so let's get to it. We start with an update into the killing of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Wafa reports that Palestinian Attorney General Akram al-Khatib has said that the Israeli sniper's bullet, which killed the veteran Palestinian journalist on May 11th, will not be handed over to the Israeli occupation authorities. However, Palestinian authorities have agreed to allow a U.S. team to examine the bullet, and that the bullet has already been handed over to the team, which has arrived in the country. Second, IMEMC and the Palestinian Prisoners Society report that 68-year-old Sadia Farajallah has died in an Israeli prison. She was the oldest woman detainee. She was arrested December 18, 2021, and accused of trying to stab a Jewish Israeli. She was beaten at the time of her arrest and had diabetes and high blood pressure and was taking medications before she was taken prisoner. The Israeli authorities denied her family the opportunity to visit her throughout her imprisonment. Akram Samara, a lawyer for the Palestinian Detainees Committee, last saw her last Tuesday in court, adding that she was, quote, in a wheelchair, unable to speak, and looked very fragile. They report that Samara said the Israeli authorities refused to provide medical reports detailing her health condition and were denying her the right to medical treatment during her imprisonment. Finally, Middle East Monitor reports that 5 Palestinians were detained after Israeli settlers attacked Palestinian protesters at the weekly Sheikh Jarrah protests. According to a Palestinian activist from Sheikh Jarrah, quote, a number of Israeli settlers spread into the area during the weekly protest and attacked the protesters as soon as they had arrived near a farm of the Salem family. He added that settlers stole the Palestine flag from the protesters and tore it up, and that the settler aggression continued while in the presence of Israeli occupation forces. In activism news, the Palestine Chronicle reports on a statement released by the UN Human Rights Office in the occupied Palestinian territory. It said it was alarmed by the impact of intensified Israeli forces' operations on the right to life of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and urged Israel to respect human rights law during military activity in the West Bank. According to the statement, quote, since the beginning of the year, as of June 30th, Israeli forces have killed 60 Palestinians, including 14 boys and 5 women, in the context of law enforcement operations in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. It added, quote, many of the cases monitored by the UN Human Rights Office indicated that Israeli forces used lethal force in a manner that appears totally inconsistent with international human rights law, and, quote, Israeli use of lethal force has become a pervasive practice in the OPT, often employed regardless of the specific level of gravity of the potential threat detected, and often as a first rather than as a last resort, contrary to international standards. The statement ended with a call for investigations into the use of lethal force by Israeli forces and a call for the end of the practice of using lethal force as an initial reaction to protests. And Al Jazeera reports that, quote, the European Union has told 2 prominent Palestinian NGOs that it will resume funding them after a year-long suspension tied to unfounded terror allegations made by Israel. The European Commission, the EU's executive branch, sent letters several days ago to Al-Haq and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, PCHR, informing them that their 13-month-long suspensions were lifted unconditionally and with immediate effect. The EU suspended its funding to Al-Haq and PCHR in May 2021. This came after European diplomats had received a classified Israeli intelligence dossier alleging that 6 prominent Palestine-based NGOs, including Al-Haq, were using EU money to fund the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, also known as the PFLP. However, no evidence tying any of these 6 organizations to the PFLP has been made public in those 13 months, and it is still not clear why the Commission suspended its funding for the PCHR, as it was not one of the 6 NGOs mentioned. The EU's reversal comes after Al-Haq had begun a legal case against the EU. Finally, you may recall that Ben & Jerry's declared that it would stop allowing its ice cream to be sold in the occupied territory. However, now Ben & Jerry's parent company, Unilever, has announced that the ice cream will continue to be sold throughout Israel and the occupied West Bank. According to Mondoweiss, quote, Unilever sold the Israeli branch of the Vermont-based brand to Avi Zinger, owner of American Quality Products. Zinger can now sell the ice cream under Hebrew and Arabic names throughout the region, including the illegally occupied West Bank. Zinger openly celebrated the purchase as a victory against the BDS movement. This goes against the wishes of Ben & Jerry's, which responded with a statement that states, quote, we are aware of the Unilever announcement. While our parent company has taken this decision, we do not agree with it. Unilever's arrangement means Ben & Jerry's in Israel will be owned and operated by AQP. Our company will no longer profit from Ben & Jerry's in Israel. We continue to believe it is inconsistent with Ben & Jerry's values for our ice cream to be sold in the occupied Palestinian territory. And that's our news this week. On the Ground for Palestine is produced by Kumi Now, an initiative of Sabeel Jerusalem that is focused on nonviolent solutions to occupation based on international law. This week is a sort of break week. We will be back with a webinar a week from Tuesday on July 12th, 6 p.m. Palestine time, focusing on morally responsible investing. Remember, links to the stories mentioned in this video are always available below the video or in the show notes. If you like this weekly roundup, we suggest you subscribe to this podcast through your favorite podcast app, join us at kuminow.com, follow us on social media, and join our weekly new Kumi Now newsletter. You can sign up at kuminow.com/register. You can let us know what you think of this news roundup by emailing us at kumi@kuminow.com. We thank you for your role in activism for Palestine and Israel, for only together may we rise up.